Okay, so first of all, I have a couple of little eh, things to get cleared up right away. You might notice that I have got some version numbers now on some of my copy paste files. Um, I'm going to deal with two different issues that came up. One was with the appointment, right? I hadn't noticed, but a student emailed me. It just didn't impact my way of looking at it. I was so used to seeing it, it didn't really bother me. But it's a valid point. The code that I previously had here for the duration, actually, I have it in the project here as well. So let me bring Visual Studio over. Uh, yeah, so right here in the appointment, I commented it out down here and left it in the posted solution so far. Remember, this is what I did. I did a whole bunch of these inline ifs, right, to decide if we should show anything about days and hours and minutes only if it was appropriate, right? It's kind of a way to put it together in a fairly concise manner. But the student emailed me and pointed out the fact that, wait a second, sometimes with this code that I had here, you would get a comma with nothing following it, right? So it might be 2 hours, and then there would be a comma, and there's nothing said about minutes, right? It didn't impact my brain looking at that. So I thought, you know what, I need to fix that. It's probably not as professional as it could be in terms of the display of the information. So I made a quick attempt to try and figure out, but this is already complex enough, right? So I thought, no, I'm going to break it down. Never be afraid. Always program your code in the style that makes sense to you, right? You don't have to impress anybody with how clever your code is, right? I certainly never worry about it. So I decided that, you know what? I think that just doing it as a series of ifs, okay, it's easier for me to include the logic necessary to make sure I don't put trailing commas this way. So first of all, I check minutes, show if there's any minutes, right? And then I'll start off by adding that to my string that I'm building up. I start with it empty up here. Then we show how many minutes with that min at the end of it, and that's all there is to it, right? Okay. And of course, minutes is already just showing the integer value of the minutes, so I don't need anything fancy inside the brackets of my toString, right? Then see if there's hours. Okay, so I determine the hours, okay, putting the S on the end. And then I decide, okay, well, if there's also minutes, then I'm going to put a comma, right? And then finally, I'll add what I already had. Okay, the minutes was already in there. So I stick this on the front. I work out the hours, okay, decide if I need a comma, and then glue that to the front of the string so it goes in front of the minutes. Same logic here for the days, right? I figure out the days, if there needs to be an S on the end and so on. And then if there's anything, so I figured, well, I could just check if there's any hours or any minutes, then I know there's already information. I could have written it to like check the length of, what is in the string so far. That would be another approach you could do. But, then you have to think about, well, what length is reasonable, right? I guess I could have checked for any characters, but I thought this is an okay thing to comparing numbers is very fast and efficient, so I just checked the hours and the minutes. So if there was any data that would have led to something being added to the duration first, right, then I make sure I have a comma, right? And it doesn't matter whether it was hours or minutes. So as I said, there's more than one way you could put code like this together. But the only difference between this version, okay, of this particular summary property, and the code I had previously is now if there's just days and nothing else to mention about hours or minutes, I don't have a trailing comma at the end, right? So anyway, it's a good exercise. It was in response to a question from a student. And, it never hurts to kind of think through a situation and come up with an alternate way. And I'm not saying this is the best way, but it works, right? And I'm happy with it for now. So I wanted to share that with you. So I've actually changed this in the posted code in both the copy paste file and in the posted solution, right? So that's the one kind of niggly thing I wanted to get out of the way. And I have one more embarrassing thing. uh, I was so keen. I added it earlier on, but you'll notice that I mentioned it in the actual current weekly folder here, right? Where is Blackboard gone? Oh, where's Blackboard? Oh, okay, over here. That's why I'm not, right? Um, Down here in step 7, I mentioned those bootstrap tooltips, right? Previously, what I had been doing is we were showing just the words yes and no on the index for the patient to say whether they were in a medical trial. So a useful technique with a nullable foreign key when there's too much text to show, right? A little tooltip worked, but unfortunately, because I decided to do that at the last minute, I missed a bit of the code. Okay, if I click the link here for the tooltips, see a tooltip is just part of HTML, right? That's why it worked. It came up with the text on the screen, but it wasn't nicely formatted by Bootstrap, right? So that's the little bit I was missing, and it gives me a chance to talk about adding script to a page anyway, because the first time that's really come up as an issue, and we're going to be doing it more and more as time goes on. So it's not a waste of time talking about this now, even though I'm prompted to do it because I accidentally left out the script, okay? There's a little bit of script needs to be added to the bottom of the page, basically, in order for Bootstrap to throw its weight behind styling the code nicely when we actually hover over and we get the little tooltip coming up, right? So the documentation is right here, but let me get back to our code inside of our application. Okay, so I'm going to close that index. Oh, no, might need this index view. Yes, I do. Okay. In terms of getting code on the page, right, I want to point out a couple things. Earlier on, okay, we looked at the layout page, right? We saw this is like the shell, right, for the interface that we're building in our application. It has the full doc type tag, the header for our HTML page, the body, etc., right? It has the whole footer section down here, and really each of our views come in here and they just get rendered in with this render body command, right? So when we call a view, it gets rendered in the middle of this container, okay, inside here, right? So one of the things that works along with that is we have this command down here to render section, okay? What section does it render? The script section. And we kind of ignored it so far because the plan was to talk about it when we actually needed to. But a number of our views, when we scaffolded them, include a little bit of JavaScript at the bottom. Right. Yeah. For example, if I come to Patients here and go to Edit, way down here at the bottom, look at this section named Scripts, right? And it is pulling in a partial view, which really just contains a number of scripts to support that validation. So the Bootstrap is giving us that nice effect of having those validation messages show up inside the span and so on, right? Now you notice that wasn't on the index page, right? There was no mention of a section for scripts on the index page, but it was here on edit. It was here on create, right? Wherever we were going to be doing validation, it was automatically added. I don't think it would be on delete. Let me just, no, see, and it wasn't needed on details. So it was really just being added to the edit and the create because that's where we had a need for JavaScript to support the validation approach, right? So we didn't have it on index either. But let me just get back to the layout for a second. So on layout here, when it hits this code in the processing, it says, okay, look at the view that's being supplied here. Does it have a section with the name scripts? If it does, right, then we're going to make sure that we put it into the page as we're building the entire web page that's sent down to the client. So that's how the scripts that we add to an individual view get sent to the client. So on my index view, right, remember this is what we did is we added this support for a Bootstrap toggle, right, as a tooltip, okay? And now if we add a tooltip, even without the styling, it will still work. That's why when I just hovered over the word yes, I'm not going to show you because I've showed you many times, the name actually appeared, but it didn't strike me at the time, I should have caught it, that no, it wasn't properly styled. And that's all we're really getting. But right in that tutorial, it mentioned to add this little bit of script, right, this JavaScript. So how do I make sure that gets included on the page where I want it? I added my own manually at section that gives a name to the section or marks it as a section. The name is scripts, right? So inside here, I just put my standard script tag, script type JavaScript. Now I know you've all used a little bit of JavaScript before when you worked with Mark, right? So you're not a stranger to using a little bit of JavaScript at the very least. So it's just copied and pasted right out of that reference, the Bootstrap reference. So now on here, when I run the application again, right, I'm just going to point you out the impact of having that little bit of script, as well as we'll look at a couple other things, the little changes we've made to the project before going on to the next part. And where did it open? Oh, didn't open yet. I've got to learn to be more patient sometimes. Here we go. All right. Okay. So might as well finish that discussing that. So if I come here to patience, and now when I hover over, look at that. That looks much better than before, right? I'm getting a much nicer styling to these tooltips. Okay. Now, again, if I direct you back to the documentation there, uh, sorry, I should have left this tab open, I guess. It does go on in here. Feel free to read about it. So you can change if you want the tooltip on the top, the left, the bottom, et cetera, right? So there's lots here you can do with these tooltips as well, right? And I mentioned here as well that if you don't want to use the tooltip, another thing is the Bootstrap popover, right? Easily implemented, okay, a popover. It looks very much like a tooltip, except, right, it comes up with a little like a little dialog box, okay? The only thing about this is, you kind of, by default, you got to click it again to get rid of it. That's why with the tooltip, as soon as I move away from hovering over it, it disappears, right? So it's your choice, whichever is applicable for your situation, feel free to use it. But make sure, unlike me, you follow all the documentation and you'll be good. Okay, so that basically shows you the two little things that I kind of left out was having the code here for the tooltip and let's come to appointments, right? So you see now I don't have that trailing comma anymore, right? So let me pick something here. I'll pick the very top record. Right now it's set to 40 minutes. So if I go in edit to change the start and end times here, well, maybe I'll add a day. Is there a 31st to August? I think there might be. There we go. Now see it says 1 day later here, but notice under duration it has a comma before the minutes, right? 1 day, 40 minutes. There's no mention of hour. That's okay. It's just there's no hour to talk about. It's a full day plus 40 minutes is the duration, right? So that's getting us exactly the effect that I wanted without showing, see down here, 1 hour, right? There's no trailing comma behind, right? So small change, but since a student brought it up, I wanted to address it. And it doesn't hurt to talk about the fact that there's more than one correct way to get code in place, right? Okay, so that wraps up step 6, and then as we got as far as 7a. So we're going to go on now to start talking about 7b, right? So in 7b, we're going to take the current filtering that we've done, and we're going to start adding sorting, right? So feel free to grab this copy paste file, use it to follow along, right? I have it in my notepad file, which I find easier to copy and paste from. Okay. Actually, let me bring it over to the screen. Notice that I say here, wait before we go on, make sure you add this to the bottom of your index. But I took time to actually go in if you download the posted solutions from the content categories there, examples and solutions, I did actually modify the solution to include this now, right? Okay. So we come on to sorting. Now, there are methods that work out there in various online tutorials, but I'm going to show you what I consider a better method than some of the ones you'll find, right? Because it works nicely and harmonizes with what we've done so far for the filter, right? Okay. So as we get prepared to actually think about sorting, you can only sort by one column at a time for the most part, right? Although we can in code decide that, well, you're always going to sort by something in addition, right? So if you sort by the date, but if we decide as a designer that after sorting by date, we're going to sort by customer name or something, well, we can do that. But the user just clicks on a column heading to say, this is my priority, sort by this, okay? So that's going to give us basically 3 pieces of information we need, right? I'm going to need to know what field to sort on, whether it's going to be ascending or descending, right? And of course, I need to know what button they've clicked. So that ties into what we did in the last lesson. Remember, we used the word action button, okay, as the name of our filter button, right? And now we're going to have buttons instead of links. They're going to look like links. We're going to have buttons at the top of each column that we want to enable sorting, right? So you click that button to sort by first name or last name or whatever, right? But the button itself will have its own value property. And by examining, okay, that we can find out which button was clicked. Was it the filter or did they want to sort by one of our columns? Right, so I'm just going to move this to the side and follow the instructions along as we do this inside Visual Studio itself. Okay. All right. So maybe I'll start by closing up everything so that we know we're just starting from scratch here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the patient's controller because it's going to be the patients as the example. That's where you got all this data, right? I'm going to use it as an example. Here's where we've already added. Oh, sorry, I've got the model class there. Trying to watch Blackboard for comments and watch my screen, both screens at the same time. Oh, boy, I'm going to get a sore neck from turning my head back and forth over and over again. Okay, all right. Oh, let me get that. Hang on one second. All right, so what we're doing here is I've come into the patient's controller. Remember, this is the code we added, right? So we can filter possibly by three different things. If they've selected a doctor, if they've selected a medical trial, remember these are nullable because we have options at the top of each select list to say like all or none, things like that, or any characters that they want to search the name with our search string parameter, right? So we're going to need count them, three more parameters, right? So I'm going to add them in here. It doesn't matter at this point if I do them at the beginning or at the end, okay? I don't know, maybe I'll put them at the end, right? But you know, that's getting awfully long. Oh, I need a comma as well, right? Okay, so I'm going to look for action button, sort direction, and sort field. Now these are gray at the moment because I'm not utilizing them yet, okay? And notice what we're doing here is we're basically, this is an easy way to define if you don't ask for otherwise, or if it's the first request for the page, what are we going to sort by? I'm going to sort by that column with the heading patient, right? So our sort field is actually going to come from the column heading that was clicked on, right? And that's actually going to be the value of the button, okay? But we're setting it like this way as the initial default. All right. Now, let's just make sure that in my copy paste file, there's a few notes here that we're going to have to make some changes, of course, in the actual view as we work along. And basically it says if you don't have it already, add the opening form tag. Done. Okay, we already have it from the earlier work we did adding the filter. However, right, at the time, I just put the closing form tag, right? So it just wrapped and contained the actual filter part of the screen, right? The filter form, so to speak. For this technique to work, okay, we want to be able to capture all the buttons that are clicked on the page, okay, in order to submit the data, right? And we're going to be adding buttons, particularly at the heading of each column. We're going to make that a button that we can click. So that part, the table here where we show all the data, has to now be included in the form. So I'm going to cut, Control X, cut the form tag out, go to the very bottom. I don't have to, the scripts can come after it, of course, right? But I'll close it there. Okay. Now it didn't reformat it for me, so every once in a while this should work if I come down to edit under advanced. If I was smart, I'd remember format document is Control K, Control D, but I use it so rarely that, that there. Okay, it just took care of all the proper indenting now. So all the data is contained inside the form, right? That's the next thing. That's absolutely necessary. Okay, so next we're going to come down to the column headings. So right now we were taking great advantage of display name for, and you know what? We technically could, I could, use that to provide the text inside the button. But the danger of that is in my code, I need to look for specific values, right? No other way to get around. Wow, there probably is a way, but I can live with this because, for the most part, in the design of the page, right, I'm going to be happy to just actually fix names for the tops of these columns. It's something I can easily maintain, and that way it avoids possible confusion because if I changed the display name in the model class and didn't think about the fact that there might be references to that specific name in code, then I could get into trouble. So, it's six of one, half dozen the other. You've got to maintain things sometimes in some places in your code, right? You can't have every change propagated and handled everywhere for you easily, right? So we have our form. What we're going to do is we're going to make these column headings into buttons, right? So as it says here in my copy paste file, a typical one, okay, will look like this. I'm going to just copy the code and put it in. So this is where, this is, of course, it's using the display name for the patient full name, which is just the word patients, right? So I'm just going to put my code in here, and the value would be the word I want to appear at the top of the page, right? So what is that? It is patience. Okay. And so now next time I run, this will appear as a link. Okay. This takes care of that for me. My class, my Bootstrap class is button dash link, right? So that's why it's going to look like a regular HTML link. Okay. And away we go. So that's good for that one. I'm going to do basically the same thing. I could copy this, do it for my age, which is just the word age, right? And so on and so forth. So expected yearly visits, right? Now, let me talk about medical trial. Well, I'm probably not going to try to sort by medical trial, right? Or patient conditions. Well, maybe I will do that. No, I'm going to leave it for now. Patient conditions, definitely not, because that's a many to many, right? There might be check boxes checked off, so there's no way you're going to try and sort by a collection, right? The doctor, though, I definitely going to want to be able to sort by the column headed with the word doctor. So I could put all the patients sorted on the page by that. Okay. Oh, sorry. This was the expected yearly visits. So you have to come up with I'm going to follow what I had for the display name, which was visits per year. Okay. So these 4 columns I'm going to sort by. Doesn't make sense to me to sort by medical trial, right? Because it's really just yes and no is all that's displayed, right? And the patient conditions is a collection. So that doesn't make any sense. I'm not going to do that, right? Okay, so that's good for the, so what do we do about these? Because they won't match, they won't look right, okay? They'll be the old kind of labels, okay? And they're even positioned at a different height on the screen and so on. So for the ones that we aren't going to sort by, I used to just sometimes use one of these links and put disabled equals disabled, but then it's grayed out and it really doesn't match. So, I'm going to go with a slightly new arrangement now. I'm going to still have it be a, a button, a link that looks like a button. Sorry, a button that looks like a link. Sorry, but I'm going to use a slightly different class here. Button toolbar, right? And the other key thing is, notice I've taken out the name, right? So no name value pair will be sent to the server. Okay, if they do actually click on this. To make the styling look right, I found I pretty much have to leave it as the input type equals submit, but it has no effect when they click it, so it really doesn't, and they're not going to be tempted to click it because it won't look like a link, right? So that's good enough for that. And our current name for this column is just history, referring to medical history. Okay. So there we go. So again, I'm just using this Bootstrap class button toolbar. Let's see the change in the actual look of the view so far before we go further. Yeah, that's okay. All right, so if I come to patients, there we go. So now you see, right, the ones that I'm going to be able to click on and sort look like links, and these ones don't, right? So that's good. So, of course, it doesn't do anything yet, right? Notice it did post back. Look at that. Okay. Doctor ID equals medical ID equals da, 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 and action button equals, action button equals doctor. That's because this was the value of this button. All these buttons have the same name, action button, right? As well as our filter button has that same name, okay? So remember, we still have this in place, so we can filter by it. All right. Okay, so that's good. We see it's ready to work, but we don't have code on the server yet to actually do anything with it, right? So that's going to come next. Okay, so let's carry on. We've made those changes in the view. We wrapped the whole page basically into the form, or all the table as well. We've changed the column headings into these buttons that look like links, okay, and the ones that actually won't really have any effect. We just want to make sure that the styling looks consistent. So let's go back to the controller. What do we need to do here? Well, we added the parameters. So now, we're going to be able to find out the value of the action button, the name it had, right? We're going to get our sort direction because we'll be storing that in the page every time we do a sort. And of course, we need our sort field as well, right? Okay. So, oh, I wasn't done. Good thing I have my copy paste file handy. There is one more thing we need to add to the view, and that is that on subsequent, like so if maybe we sort one way and we decide we want to sort a different way, well, the logic involved here means that we have to have a memory. We have to know what was the last sort direction and sort field, right? Those two pieces of information. How can we persist that into the view? Well, you've done this kind of thing before. We have an input type called hidden, right? It's not displayed. It just tucks it away in the source code of the page, right? Has no effect, but it just means that if, as long as it's inside the form, between the opening form and the closing form tag, then when we post the form back, the name value pair in this hidden input will get passed in. And that's how we'll have access to the history of what the last, right? The last sort direction and the last sort field was. So I'm going to put it right underneath the opening form tag. And this is right out of our copy paste file. Input type hidden, okay? And those names, sort direction, sort field, well, they should look familiar, right? Those are the other parameters we put up here, sort direction, sort field, okay? And of course, see, we're setting a default. So if there was nothing stored there, then we're going to set it to patient and ascending, right? That would be our default sort order. But see, the next time, if they sort once and different values get stored into these hidden inputs, then when it posts back, it'll overwrite, okay, these default values with whatever was used last time. Okay. All right. I promise now, I really think I'm done with all the changes I needed to the view. So let's carry on in the controller. Okay. Now, in the controller, we have our parameters, right? Now, we want to do something with the sort options, okay? What I found, because we want to be able to persist this and work with it in multiple places, the best idea is to actually create a list, okay, of what options we're going to allow sorting by, right? So this could go above, the order here doesn't really matter too much in code. I'm going to put it in right here. List of sort options. Note, make sure this array has matching values to the column headings, right? This is why we can't just rely on the display name properties in the model, because the values I put here have to match the values I've used down here, right? For the actual values of the buttons I want to be able to sort by. They have to match for this to work, okay? But that's okay. Make sure that this array has matching values and we're good, right? So that's it. I can populate my drop-down list. I don't have to make any changes to the actual query here, right? That's perfectly fine. Oh, I have those comments here explaining. I guess it couldn't hurt to have the comments here above the query. So I'm going to take that out of my copy paste file, right? Start with the includes, but make sure we return that iQueryable. We had that discussion the other day. I won't rehash it again now. All right, and then we add as many filters as we need, right? Okay, and then that's it. So we're done with the filters. So after doing the filter work, I'm going to add the sorting now, right? Okay, so maybe I'll do this a bit at a time. Okay, so I'm going to say here, before we sort, see if we have called for a change of filtering or sorting, right? So we're checking that action button. If it's not null, then the form was submitted. It wasn't a GET request. We posted back, right? We posted back by clicking at least one of the buttons contained inside the form, okay? So then we check, okay, if our sort option, that array we made it with the 4 values that were being used as column headings, right? If the value of our action button is contained in those sort options, then we've asked for a sort. We're here because we clicked a column heading. That's the logic there, okay? Now, if it's the same one as they sorted by last time, then we know they don't want to sort by something different. All they want to do is reverse, right? They want to reverse the sort order. That makes sense, right? If you click a column heading the second time, maybe it's the name of the patient you've clicked, right? The first time you sort it might be alphabetically by last name first, and then starting with the A's going to the Z's, right? Click it again. The implication, the way we're used to these interfaces working, is you would reverse the order. So the name starting with Z would come to the top and so on. So that's what this line of code does. Okay, if we're clicking the same column heading as we did last time, then we're going to reverse the order. And we do that by changing sort direction. If it was ascending, we make it descending, right? Or if it was not ascending, since we're only going to support 2 values for it, then we put it to ascending, right? And there we go. That just reverses the sort order, right? And then we store that action button value into our sort field. So that's what gets put back into the page, right? When we supply the value for that hidden input. Okay, so the sort direction we know eventually we store back into the hidden input. Same with the sort field. Okay, so that is just, now we've decided what our actual sort field and sort direction are, right? And we prepared, of course, to write it back to the page. Now, actually do the sorting. So this, unfortunately, is going to just be a series of ifs, right? Um, so now that we know the direction to sort, so I'm just going to grab the code to do the sorting, and I'm going to put it in place. Okay, so let's have a look at it, right? Okay, so this section here, we decided the sort order, okay, and what filter or field we're going to filter by, or sort by, sorry. So now we know, right, the field and the direction. So, hey, if the sort field was visits per year, right, then we decide the sort direction. Is it ascending or descending? Okay, because when it comes down to it, what we have to do is we actually have to execute different LINQ queries, right? Remember, our patients is our actual query, our iQueryable. We defined that. We started defining it way up here, right? We made sure it was an iQueryable. Why? So we could do this. We were adding where clauses, right? 1, 2, maybe up to 3 or more. Who knows by the time we maybe add some more choices here. So all these different filters are added to that iQueryable, that query we're calling patients. So now down here, we're still pounding that poor thing, our patient's iQueryable. We're saying, you know what? We're not fun. We're not done, right? No, of course we're fun, but we're not done, right? We're going to keep on working with this same query before we actually execute it. Now we're going to look at adding an order by, right? So if we've asked for ordering by the visits per year, right, and we want it in ascending order, then we take the existing one, even with all the where clauses that might have been added, and we add an order by based on the expected yearly visits, right? Now, unfortunately, there isn't an easy way to reverse that except by giving a different command. We have order by or order by descending, right? So we have to use an else branch in our if and then say we're going to order by in descending order, right? That's if it isn't ASC, then because we only allow 2 values, it'll be DESC, right? So then we'll order by descending. Then, okay, we're doing else if because we're only going to sort by one of these choices, right? So we do an else if. So if it wasn't, they didn't ask for sorting by visits per year, do they ask for sorting by age? And then the same logic in here. If it was ascending, we do order by descending. What? What do you mean order by descending? Well, think about dates, right? If you want it in ascending age, you have to do it by descending date of birth, right? Because I'm sorry, an older person has an earlier birth date in the calendar, right? So that's just the logic that's necessary. But the else branch then, we order by date of birth if we want it in descending order of age, right? Okay. And finally, if we sort by doctor, okay, then we're going to do it by patient's order by the doctor's last name. Now, we touched on this before. When you do ordering, you can only order by one expression. And this, so we're using the lambda to indicate last name. You only have one order by, but you can have as many then bys as you want, right? So I could say then by last name for, whatever, right? So that's how it works if it's ascending order. If it's descending, in other words, if it's not ASC for the sort direction, then I still only get one order by, but it'll be order by descending last name, then by descending first name, right? Now, all we're doing here is I'm just setting a single order. It could be that no matter which of these we decided, we want to say, well, you know what? No matter which one we do here, if there's a group of matching values, say a bunch of people all with the same age, maybe I want it sorted by the patient name as well. Well, you could add to that and away you go, right? You can add additional then by clauses to any one of these, okay, if you want any subgroup to be sorted in a particular way, right? Here's my else, sorting by patient name. right? So if it wasn't any of the other three that I've set up for, the expected yearly visits, the age of the doctor, then I can just assume it's by the patient name, right? Remember what assumptions can get you, but I'm going to do it anyway, right? So again, I just have my decision, is it ascending or descending? And then we order by the patient name, not the doctor name, right? Okay, so, that's basically it. Now, uh, we'll come back if there's time afterwards. Then after we've decided how we're sorting, then I can set the sort for the next time. Remember, by putting into view data, the current sort field and sort direction, that's what gets written out here, right? Okay, remember we're getting the values for these hidden inputs from our view data, okay, that collection of name value pairs. So that's how we persist it into the view so that next time we'll know what did they sort by last time. All right, so let's actually give her a test, give her a trial run. And here we are, almost. Okay, so coming to patients, right? So now maybe I'll try age. If I click on age, there we go. So all the youngest, 0 age, right? They're newborn, basically, right? Right up to, well, why don't I just click it again, test if my switching from ascending to descending works. There we go. Now you see, because Jane doesn't have a birthday, remember birthdays aren't required, right? It just popped to the top of the list. But here we are, descending age, right? The oldest down to the youngest patients and so on. So same thing, I can click patients, do it alphabetically by last name and first name. Okay, why didn't that work? Well, let's just test the others, right? Everything else is working. Ah, okay. So that tells me one thing. I probably uh, have not the S. See, doctor doesn't have the S. See, I should have double checked, okay? Because the name I'm using here for the value, right, of the button itself looks like a link, but it's a button. The value has the S on it, but in my code, I'm certain I don't, right? Which would explain why it's happening. And that is determined right up here where I define the values, right, for my sort options. So I could decide to include the S here or not, right? So I'm not going to. So that means that I should, in the page, be consistent, right? Down here, take out the S, okay? Like I said, make sure, I didn't do it, but I'm doing it now, make sure that these values we're setting for the heading on top of each column exactly match the ones we're using here, right? Because that's how we're correlating it or knowing which one it is we want, right? So I've made that change. I'll just save it. Let's just hot reload here. And if I bring up the browser, now it should work. Okay, and now I'm sorting by the patient name. Now, you might argue, and I can't say it's right or wrong. There are many things that are sort of design decisions. So you ask your client, right? We're sorting by last name and then first name, right? So, but we're showing it first name, middle, initial, last name. So, maybe because of the way we're sorting it, the end user would prefer to see Anthony Braden N, right? Right. See the last name, right? And we could quickly and easily change that, couldn't we? I could even do it without stopping. If I come back to the index, okay, in the data for the column, instead of doing full name, formal name. Oh, do I not have a formal name in the patient? Oh, that's what I get. See, I don't always prepare everything ahead of time, but that means you're getting live development experience here. Okay. All right. Well, that's not going to work until I actually go and add that property. I'm not going to do that while I'm still running, right? So let me put it back. If I really want to, I better, since I started this, come over here to the model class, right? Remember, we did that in doctor. We added both full and formal names, right, for the doctor, but we didn't do it for patient. Obviously, I only have full name. So if I want to, right, easy, no problem. I can even steal the code here for this formal name because I use the exact same names for the three properties, first name, middle name, last name, right? And maybe I'll stick the display name on here as well. It's nice that we can have, you can't have two properties that actually have the same name, but we can use the display name more than once in our models, right? Now, will this affect the database? Do I have to worry about a migration? Absolutely not, right? It's a read-only property, a summary property. It has a getter, there's no setter. So there's no implication that means I have to do any changes to the database, how the data is stored or worked with in the database. But now I could come over here, change this to formal name, and away we go. Now, as I said, it's not right, it's not wrong, it's just whatever your client is happy with. So now I'm showing it last name, comma, first name, and it makes a little more sense when I'm sorting it by that last name and then first name approach, but it's entirely up to you, right? Okay, so there, we've got our sorting. Oh, our final test. I told you that this approach would not interfere. In fact, it harmonizes with the approach we did for filtering. So I should be able to apply a filter, right? Pick a doctor, hopefully one that has a few patients. Okay, right? And then now within this group, I can sort, right? I can sort by age, by expected visits per year. No, it's all the same doctor. But you know, it does work. It just because I filter by doctor, it doesn't make sense to try and sort by it, but I can sort by name, etc. Right? So we do have the filter and the uh, sort working at the same time. Okay, of course you can. Yeah, a good question from a student. Can we use a library to avoid repeated code in the different entities, right? Yeah, you can indeed. So I just was trying to keep it simple and do it a step at a time, but by all means, go ahead and do so. So, you know, you could even create classes that inherit, right? So you might have a person class with all those properties in, and both doctor and patient could inherit from that. That would be one way to do it as well. All right. Any other thoughts or questions before I go on? Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to stop running for a second. And that basically covers the lesson. But, you know, I usually like to throw these little bits of extra fun stuff in, right? So, as I said, this is not related to filtering or sorting. But let's look at another use of that bootstrap collapse. I'm going to try and convert everyone to using this free bootstrap framework by the time we're done, right? Um, so right now, for our medical history, right, let me come back to the index here. Okay. Medical trial, we've taken care of with our tooltips. But the medical history, right? We just have this for each loop, looping through all the conditions, showing each name with a BR tag, right? So, you know, it works. It gets it all up on the screen, but I should have left it running, sorry. Let me just remind you what it looks like, though, and why we might want to improve it, right? So if I come to patients, okay, now because of the sorting, uh, my usual culprits, Fred and Wilma and so on, aren't at the top of the page. But if I come here and say, oh, in their history they have this. Oh, they had mumps and measles, right? No liver disease, but yeah, they've had all these, right? Hopefully not cancer as well, because they've already got enough in their history. But you see what happens, okay? You get a whole big long stack of these values showing up. So you might say, you know what? We should probably be doing something like this here, finding a way to concisely indicate, oh, there's something going on, right? And maybe leave it to the details page. But you know, perhaps our client has asked us, well, no, I want the history available right there on the index view, right? How can we make this a little bit more efficient? Well, of course. We've seen already that we can expand and collapse, right? Easily with Bootstrap. So let's see if we can do the same thing here and maybe include an indicator of how many values there are in this little list of conditions they have in their medical history, right? So the code might look a little extreme at first, but we'll walk through it together, and it's pretty much something you can just adopt anytime you need it, right? So I'm just going to replace the table data tag here with this version I have in my copy paste file. Yeah, it looks scary, but really it's not, okay? So what we do is we come in, notice of course we're using this as how we get into the Razor code, the C# code that we're embedding into the HTML page. So now I'm just writing C# in here, right? So I can do my item, because remember, we're looping through each item in the model, okay? That's in the C# world as well, right? So I can take the item, take the patient conditions and count, see how many there are. Of course, if there's none, nothing to do. There's nothing to show. Boom. Okay, we'll be done. But if there's greater than one, then we want to show something inside this table data tag, right? So I found it seemed to work fairly well to go and get the first one, right? We're going to get the first or default, that condition, and I'm going to grab the condition name. I'm going to stick it in here in the string for first condition, right? So I'm going to notice in the else branch, if there isn't more than one, my work is done. I just include it here with the @ symbol. So I'm jumping back into the HTML of the page and putting this first condition in, right? Whatever that name is. But if the count is greater than one, then we're going to have to do some looping, right? So I'll put together a condition list skipping that first one, right? Okay, so I just grab them all as a list of objects, right? And then I'm going to loop through the list, okay, incrementing through up to the count, right? Skipping the first because I skipped the first by setting this equal to 1 instead of 0, right? If it was 0, it would start at the first, but I've already got that in my string, so I want to skip that. So starting at the index of 1 misses the first, right? Then for each one, I'm going to add it to this condition list with a BR tag. Okay, so yeah, we were using a BR tag already, but don't worry, this is going to be inside of a collapse, right? So this will finish building, okay, that whole list, right? Then we add a link here, okay, again using that bootstrap toggle set to collapse, right? Okay, now it has to have an href, okay, for the actual div that we expand and collapse. Well, that's this one here, right? But you can't have IDs in a web page that are they have to be unique, right? The IDs have to be unique. I can't have duplication, two is the same. Well, I want to have it to be collapse history, which is just my own name for it. I could call it Fred and it would work, right? But if I just reuse that over and over again, I get into trouble. It wouldn't know which one to expand and collapse, right? So that's where I'm incorporating the actual primary key, okay, into it. So it'll only ever be uniquely there once, right? So that's going to be the basically the ID of the actual div that we expand and collapse, okay, that contains the actual condition list, right? Now that's everything except the first one because I'll put that inside the link itself. I'll put the name of the first condition, and here, okay, I'm doing a count of how many there are, and I'm using this little bit of bootstrap to make it look like this little badge, right? And that'll be right beside the name, okay? So with the name of the first one, it'll also show how many there are. I can click this link and it will expand or collapse, okay, the list of all the other names of conditions as well. Of course, if there was only one, we just show it and we're done. If there were none, we show nothing, right? So that is basically the effect that we're going for here. Okay, let's just see it in operation. That will help you understand what I'm doing in the code. Okay, all right, so if I come to patients now, all right, so here's this one where we added. So you see I can click it and it expands and shows me all of them, right? I can see right away though there's 9. Now let's edit somebody else, okay? I'll just give maybe a couple here, mumps and measles, two of the most common ones, right? So then it just shows 2. I'll go to this person, I'll just check off 1. They have trouble with their newspaper circulation. Okay, so it just shows the name if there's only 1, right? Okay, so yeah, it means that all the information is available to click on, but we don't take up huge amounts of the screen real estate just to show the whole list. And they can click. Notice it stays expanded until they click it again, right? But that's okay. People figure out how to use that very, very quickly, right? Now we might want to even put that, like, say right now in details. If I go back, let's pick on this person. You know, they have the whole list there. If you want, you could incorporate the same kind of a collapse here as well, or you could have it totally shown. In my copy paste file, I even have the code to use. The only difference is uh, um, we just change item to model, right? Because uh, we're looping through each item. Each patient is an item, right? And that's how we wrote the code. But when we go to details or even delete, okay, the model is a single patient, right? So that's the only change in the code. Maybe I'll do that. I can see if I can do it while it's still running. No, it's too hard for me because sometimes it's just a pain to try and work while it's still running. So if I come to the views, I might as well finish this because I'm going to do it anyway before I post the code. So coming down here to the appointment reasons, right? And of course, the other changes, instead of a table data tag, we're using the definition list, right? So for the appointment reason, but it's exactly the same logic, okay? That'll get straightened out in a second. I think it's just running a little bit behind in terms of determining. Oh, I'm in the wrong one. I'm in appointments. You should have stopped me, okay? I wanted to be in patients, patient details, okay? My history of patient conditions. See, I haven't finished that cold coffee that's sitting in front of me. All right, so here I'm going to replace both the DD and the DT part. Oh, no, I shouldn't have. Okay, just this part. There we go. Okay, now that should work. So it's basically the same code as what we're using, except you know it refers to model instead of item, because we only have one patient we're dealing with here. And I could do the same thing. It's in details. I could do the same thing in delete. Come down here. Okay, where I have my simple for each loop, and I'll replace this with the one with the bootstrap collapse. Final test, make sure it's all working. So if I go to details, there we go. So I can expand it and contract it. Not the end of the world. I could have lived with it there on the details page, I suppose, just showing the whole list, but since we can, why not, right? Okay. All right. Well, that is basically the end of 7B. So just to quickly recap, in 7A, we added filter and search, right? And we've seen that we can uh, filter and we can sort all at the same time. And of course, our expand and contract still works. Everything still works. All right. So that's the end of the demo. Any final questions before I stop recording this lesson? Okay. You know, it's important to have fun with this stuff, you know. I know it looks like a chunk of code, but when you work through it carefully, and you know, a lot of this stuff is very reusable, right? With a slight modification, go somewhere else and, you know, start applying these same little tips and tricks that I'm sharing with you. And in the end, I think you'll be fairly happy with the result. So, all right, I might as well stop recording this lesson, and I'm just gotta find my mouse.